Hey everybody, Sean from The Good Dog, and I'm back here in beautiful New Orleans, or right outside of New Orleans, and 3 days drive, hanging in there. We've got shadows arriving later this afternoon, so it's just a nonstop rock and roll fest. But I've had a lot of folks asking me about consequences, to define consequences, and my guess is, and don't anybody take this the wrong way, my guess is that some folks are looking for me to out myself. Consequences, you mean punishment, you mean, being mean to dogs and using tools we don't like. My guess is some folks are trying to lead me into that. Some folks, I'm sure, have no idea what I actually mean by the consequences, by sharing consequences. And then some folks probably have a pretty good idea, but are curious, what are the specific consequences that I'm talking about for situations with dogs and dog training and behavior modification and things like that. So my guess is that there's some kind of, different interests, different goals by asking me that question. But what I'm going to do is we're going to take the charitable approach and just assume that it's we're going to get rid of the first batch and just focus on folks that don't know what it is, that are really looking for just kind of an overview, and then folks that do know what I'm talking about but are looking for specifics. So let's kind of jump from there. So first of all, consequences are neither. Let me just say this: consequences aren't just a negative thing. Now, that said, the way I typically use the word consequences when I'm writing is typically in the negative sense. I'll shift it back and forth depending on what I'm trying to get across, but oftentimes I'm using consequences as a negative, and I think most of us understand that, especially in the context of the writing, how I put it together. Most of you get what I'm talking about. But just to clarify, consequences can be something pleasurable. Consequences can be something not pleasurable, something desirable, something not desirable, something that's aversive and something that's not aversive. Consequences are the consequences of your behavior then deliver you an outcome which you then interpret, or if you're the dog, which the dog then interprets as a desired outcome for the behavior that I just shared or exhibited or engaged in. And do I like that and thus will repeat it more, or do I not like that and thus will not repeat it more? The wind's really starting to blow. I'm gonna try and head over here, guys. Is the AC going? Yeah. We got nowhere to hide. Nowhere to hide, folks. It's not blowing crazy hard, but I feel like it's gonna mess with the volume, mess with the sound. Anyways, so let's just be crystal clear. Consequences are positive and negative. Wanted, not wanted. Desired, not desired. Enjoyable, not enjoyable. Pleasant, not pleasant, or unpleasant. So it's not just one thing. But the way I typically use them is I'm using them because when I'm writing, depends what I'm trying to get across message-wise. I might use punishment, and punishment gives a lot of people bristle at the word punishment. That's typically why I'll use it, because I'm trying to rescue the word punishment from what it's come to mean for a lot of people and the knee-jerk reaction that they have to it. So I'll use that word specifically for that, or I'll use the word corrections, or I'll use the word consequences if I'm looking for something that's not so focused on rescuing the word punishment and more about a different concept that I'm trying to get across. So I don't want to put the emphasis on a word that's going to derail a lot of folks, and I'm trying to get people to focus more on a different concept. I hope that makes sense. So that's just kind of the overview of what consequences are, positive and negative, and why I will choose to insert different wording depending on what I'm trying to get across message-wise in the post. So hopefully that's clear. Now, when people ask me, and I've had it in the last couple of weeks, a lot of questions about, well, what consequences are you talking about, or what would be consequences for this situation? And so, for one, it depends tremendously on the dog. You don't get to decide what are positive or negative consequences for the dog. The dog decides. So you may think you know, but ultimately the dog is the only one who makes that decision about, I like this, I don't like this. So you have to first come to terms with the fact that the dog makes the decision about what is a positive consequence, what is a negative consequence. Where else are we going with this? Okay, and then also context matters tremendously. So you can have the same dog feel very differently about one positive consequence in a certain context, and it has no impact on them because whatever it is in the environment is way too stimulating. They don't care about it as far as being rewarding. Same thing can happen in for a negative consequence. A good dog can be in a contextual, a situation contextually that just overrides any kind of negative consequence, and the dog's like, that big deal, I don't care about it. So we've got that, and then we have this whole spectrum of dogs that go from like wildly soft, sensitive dogs to incredibly firm, tough hombres, right? And so the consequences need to fit within the specific dog, the specific context, and so likely they will change depending on what you've got as far as the kind of dog you've got, and then the actual context that you're putting that dog in. So for positive consequences, super easy, right? Most folks are going to use food, treats, something like that, or they're going to use play, or they're going to use affection, things like that. Those are positive consequences for most dogs. Some dogs not going to care so much. Some are going to like food, some are going to like play, some are going to like affection, some are not going to like any of them, and then you have to find another way how to work through that. For negative consequences, it depends so much on the dog, just like the positive consequences. But negative consequences, if you've got a really sensitive dog, and some eye contact and a firm no might be more than enough for that dog to go, oh, I really don't want to do that anymore. That's like way at the soft end, and if you think that that's going to work with every dog, you're crazy. So that's a consequence if the dog perceives it as such and goes, ooh, I don't like that. Now, you could use a squirt bottle for a dog who's like whining or barking in the crate, and that dog might go, ooh, I really don't like that. And that's a really negative consequence for them, and they don't bark or whine in the crate anymore. Or the dog could be a lab and be like, I love this. This is great. Give me some more, right? So context, dog, all of it matters. Now, we keep moving, so you can move into things like a bonker. A bonker is going to be typically a more significant consequence than something like we just shared with, eye contact or verbal correction or, a water bottle. A bonker, in most situations done correctly, is going to have a much larger impact. So that would be a consequence for you folks asking. Leash and prong. That's a great way to share consequences, negative consequences that the dogs would find valuable. E-collar corrections. That's another great way to share consequences that the dog can find valuable in a negative way to not want to do something. You can also use e-collar and prong to teach and make very nice things happen, but you can also use them as an aversive to stop behaviors that you don't like. So consequences, guys, are anything that the dog finds aversive enough to change their behavior, or conversely rewarding enough to move into more of that behavior. So it's going to depend on the tools, it's going to depend on the dog, and it's going to depend on the context. It's up to you to do your research to figure out what tools you like, what tools you feel good about, what tools actually matter to your dog contextually, and then get really smart about it, take in all the data points as you utilize them, lots of observation, and then apply them accordingly. That's how consequences work. That's what the consequences are. And I've only listed just a few, but there's obviously a multitude of consequences you can jump into. I hope that helps.